Greetings, and welcome to the first edition of what we're now calling Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. I'm your host with the most, or if you prefer, the beast with the least, David. So we're going back in time, almost literally, because I've had to record this twice. I think whoever was at Hillary's emails has been on my YouTube. I read it on QAnon, must be true. To do a best of 2021 in home media. When I looked back over the amount of Blurays, tried to narrow it down, whittle it down, it became apparent there's just too many to possibly do a top 10 or 5. So I've decided to separate horror into its own thing, because there were so many vintage horror films and whatnot that I could easily make a video out of that. I'd already have, but I could delete bags and So, if some of this seems ridiculously slick, almost as if I've done it before, it's because I haven't. Just keep it between you and me though, eh? Don't tell the others. So, without further ado, let's crack on. Number one pick, no particular order. I don't care if there's more than 10 here because we're just celebrating movies, folks. One of our aircraft is missing, and these dudes are on the case. Powell and Pressburger's classic from the 1940s. Powell and Pressburger in the 40s, World War II propaganda. Do you need to know any more? Just about the time of Colonel Blimp, the 49th parallel. It's got guys like Ronald Neames in it, I think, and Eric Portman, Bernard Miles, Googie Withers in a very role. Googie Withers, of course, Bill Withers' mum. Not true. But it's also filled with things like propaganda films, shorts, even with a relatively young Ralph Richardson. I don't think he was ever young, but he was relatively young. And my favourite booklet extra in a long time is this little thing that costs, I don't know what that is, 6 or 6 shillings, 6D denarii, where you get what's not a programme, what's not a novel, but it's the whole film written out, but with pictures of this, so you get the whole plot from start to finish. So it's like a condensed novella version, I guess, of the film. I guess this is the thing that used to happen. Bring it back, guys. Yeah, I quite like that, you know. Back in the days where you could obviously just go and get the movie a few months later, you may never see it again, so that would be your keepsake, and you could relive it in your head, saying, oh look, there's a picture of Googie Withers, isn't she lovely? Out of the blue. This almost did come out of the blue, because after years of hearing that the elements were either lost or they were unusable and could never make it to HD. I don't think it was even on DVD anywhere legitimately. The BFI finally put this out. Dennis Hopper film, coming of age, down and dirty rebellion punk era. She's obsessed with Johnny Rotten and Elvis. But it's got all sorts of features with Dennis Hopper involved. Kat Ellinger does a commentary on it, and there's a feature-length documentary made up entirely of interviews with like Ethan Hawke, Richard Linklater. Alex Cox does a half-hour interview on it. I mean, the film alone takes its title from Neil Young. Out of the blue and into the black. Hey, hey, my. So if that's not enough reason, I don't know what is. Just pick that up. A great lost Dennis Hopper film. Maybe his best film. I don't care what the revisionists are saying about the last movie. That's his best film. Speaking of Teenage Rebellion, Mama's alright, Daddy's alright. They're both just a little weird. Surrender, surrender. But don't give yourself away. It's Over the Edge. one of the classics of teenage rebellion, set in 1979ish, and it's a small kind of fake town that's been made of overspill for people to move out from the city into the desert, essentially in Nevada or something like that. But nobody thought to build anything for the kids, so there's no movie theatres, there's no arcades, so the kids do what kids do, and turn to hijinks, and then the hijinks turns into mischief, and mischief turns into bother, and then bother turns into trouble, and trouble turns into trying to burn the school down with all the parents in it. Matt Dillon's debut performance, he's a raw nerve. It's an 18 for a reason. This is a dark little, teach your children well kind of movie. It's brilliant. If you haven't seen that, go on. Stevie, I owe this one to you. You told me about it and I'd never heard of it. So dedicated to you. One Summer, written by the great Willie Russell, one of Britain's greatest ever playwrights, and a bit like Rita Sue and Bob 2, it's a product of Thatcher Britain, where it's Graham up north, but this is with Scousers, as you can imagine, with a very young babyface David Morrissey there, and James Hazeldine from the Omega Factor and London's Burning, and a million other things in this era. And it's, I mentioned Rita Sue and Bob 2, that's a funny film, a satire of the Thatcher era. This is more of a kind of depressing, dark, Alan Clark-like drama, which is directed by Gordon Fleming, who directed the Peter Cushing Dalek movies in the 60s. And then did this in the 80s when he was much older. He's also Jason Fleming's father. But yeah, coming of age, but in a very different way from this. So actually quite a cool double bill to see a British coming of age and an American coming of age in a very different way, but both made around the same time. Network released this one, Arrow Video, BFI for the previous two, the Out of the Blue, and one of our aircraft is missing. Network released The Strange World of Gurney Slade, the fantastically ahead of its time Anthony Newley TV series. In this, the first 5 minutes you're watching the TV series, and then his character in the TV series just says, "I've had enough of this," and walks off the set and leaves the TV show that he's in, even though he is a fictional character. It is so ahead of his time, and this is like 1960. This is so, nobody was doing anything like this until things like Gary Shandling's show in the 80s, and a little bit of maybe Soap did a few things like that, but it doesn't just acknowledge the fourth wall, it completely shatters it. And Anthony Newley was a renaissance man, because after this he went on to write the theme tune to Goldfinger. He starred in a crime drama called The Small World of Sammy Lee, which was included in this. So for about 20 quid you get the whole avant-garde TV series and the movie, which is 15 quid in its own. And you get 3 Saturday Spectaculars, with which are like variety shows, where he appears alongside Peter Sellers, Shirley Bassey, speaking of Goldfinger, and Jeanette Scott. And I really got hard when I saw Jeanette Scott fight a trip that you poison and kills. Yeah, Anthony Newley, fantastically underrated. Johnny Depp based his entire Captain Jack performance on Anthony Newley. David Bowie's early career, you know that voice they had, that David Bowie, that's Anthony Newley's voice. He openly admits he kind of took that from Anthony Newley, who also wrote the music in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know, I've got a golden ticket, and come with me and you'll see a world of pure imagination. That was Anthony Newley as well. So, pick it up. From Australia, Imprint released one of my favourite films of this year, a classic Hollywood, one of Hollywood royalty, Liz Taylor, Shelley Winters, and one of my favourites, Monty Clift. You know, to quote The Clash, you know, that's Montgomery Clift, honey. Wow. Monty Clift was gay in real life, and Liz Taylor was not. But despite that, they have the best sexual tension of any two actors I could possibly think of in a classic Hollywood film. They are phenomenal together. It oozes tension. It's got that, you know, there was Streetcar Named Desire, had that raw sexuality. This has got that in spades. It's a bit Douglas Sirk-y, you know, Written in the Wind and those kind of movies, but it's better than any Douglas Sirk movie. Heresy, I know, because Douglas Sirk, you know, they used to call these kind of things women's pictures, but I don't think you can call this. It's not. It's just, or melodramas. They're just great movies, man. You don't need to label them and try and disparage them. Funnily enough, I mentioned Douglas Sirk, and right there, behind the camera, is a DVD Douglas Sirk box set, totally randomly. Oh well. Oops. Here's an oddity, but wow, what a film. I picked this up just when it was announced because I'd never heard of it, read about it and went, okay, I'm in. The Bingo Long Travelling All-Stars and Motor Kings. Doesn't fit very nicely on the poster, does it, you know? But it stars Billy D. Williams, coming fresh off of Lady Sings the Blues, opposite Diana Ross, playing Billie Holiday, and James Earl Jones, and Richard Pryor, with loads of other character actors. It was produced by Berry Gordy from Motown. Probably the connection there being the Lady Sings the Blues thing, because Diana Ross was Motown. It's the story of, and I can use the word because it's in the documentaries, and you know, it's the era of it, the Negro League. These guys are the best of the best in the Negro League, and they're getting paid slave wages is a horrible word to use in the context of Negro, but yeah, they're getting paid very small amounts of money, so they decide to withdraw their labour from the Negro League and set up their own team led by the best player, Bingo Long, and do a kind of Harlem Globetrotters where they become an attraction and just play like the local teams and make a kind of carnival show out of it. And then the league bosses, or the masses as they call them, just, you know, to further home the African American themes, they kind of gang together to try and bring them down. But that makes it sound heady and kind of, is it going to be about racial tension? It's a fun comedy. Billy D. Williams oozes charisma, and you get to see Lando and Darth Vader as best buddies, and Darth Vader as a mad shagger. Now, just while I say mad shagger, I need to dedicate this video to Tony McWhammy for coming up with the title for the channel. So Tony, that's why I'm wearing my Village Green Preservation Society t-shirt for you. 3 men in a boat, that's all I'll say. He knows what I mean. Warner Archive nearly went bust this year, didn't they, when old George and the crew got laid off. Warner decided they didn't need to release archive films, they could use the streaming service. Thank God, for some reason they changed their minds and we went back to normal service, because it meant a continuation of the Thin Man movies. So we've got 3, 4 and 5 here. We've got After the Thin Man, we've got Another Thin Man, I've done this in reverse order here, and Shadow of the Thin Man. And one thing I love is that in get it right, in Another Thin Man they introduce the baby, and he becomes a bit precocious in Shadow of the Thin Man. So they decide, People didn't really like the kid in the last one. Let's send him off to school, not really mention him, and just keep the dog. The dog becomes the sidekick. It was the year of Rin Tin Tin and Lassie, so bye kids. Hello dog. Fun, fantastic, murder mystery comedies with two of the most charismatic stars of the era, and Myrna Loy and William Powell, and Jimmy Stewart gets to play a baddie in this one, which very rarely happened, but this was just before it became Jimmy Stewart, the major Hollywood star. Speaking of major Hollywood names, John Ford, but these names may not jump out at you. Straight Shooting and Hell Bent, because they ain't Stagecoach and Liberty Valance and Quiet Man and insert major John Ford picture here. These are two of his silent westerns. Eureka Masters of Cinema put this out as a twofer, and it won an award today for best restoration, which nice to hear. And it stars Harry Carey. Both of them do, sorry. Both kind of similar themes. The tough guy cowboy who's working as a hired gun and then decides to turn on his employers because they've gone too far, kind of thing, and goes against the gang leader. Cracking western plots, but getting to see John Ford kind of starting out is fascinating, because you see the embryonic things that would fascinate him later on here. And if you can handle George Ford, I know a lot of people, John Ford, I know a lot of people can't because of, some of that is his attitudes. But it's certainly worthwhile seeing these early ones. There's an audio commentary by Joseph McBride, who wrote the book on John Ford, Searching for John Ford, which I've got next door, and it's that thick. It's one of the best film biographies I've ever half read, because it's taken me about a year to get that far in. Kim Newman does a documentary about Harry Carey, which if it's anything like every other Kim Newman doc, it'll be him sitting in he's just like this, surrounded by books and things, with a lovely overcoat and tweeds and but full of information, because he's Kim Bloody Newman. He's fantastic. Video essay with Tad Gallagher, archival interview with John Ford, a short fragment of the lost film Hitching Post, which is another John Ford film from 1920. Go for it. Very different here. Bill Duke's film Deep Cover. We recently saw this when I picked it up. Bill Duke refused to call this blaxploitation. Lawrence Fishburne in the documentary on it refuses to call it that. And they also reject the term New Jack for these films, which was being thrown around because of New Jack Swing being the musical movement of the period. So they tried to apply it to the films like, Boys in the Hood, and even up to, Dead Presidents, and Spike Lee's films from Do the Right Thing and onwards, as if they were all encompassing just because they were made by black filmmakers. They would never do that with any other white people, but for some reason, because they depicted black people, they had to be lumped together. But somebody like Denzel wouldn't be lumped in with them. It doesn't quite make sense to me, but again, America. It's fantastic, and it's full of conversations and documentaries that kind of look into that and can explore the black experience, because he's an undercover cop, and Jeff Goldblum's your bad guy, so you get Jeff Goldblum able to ham up, in a role that you just don't expect from old Jeff, do you? But hey, someone I've met, lovely guy, Mr. Mark Cousins, The Story of Film, an Odyssey. This was from 2011, so it came out for its 10th anniversary on Blu-ray. It is an absolutely stacked history of film, from the Lumiere brothers through Georges Méliès, Thomas Edison, John Ford, Chaplin and Keaton, right through to, I think, Avatar is pretty much where it ends. But it doesn't just do Hollywood. It goes to Mumbai, it goes to Japan, it goes to China, it goes to India. There's a whole episode devoted to the film industry in Nigeria, which is one of the biggest in the world that nobody really outside of Africa knows about. It goes to South America and Central America, you know, all over the world, and explores the different film industries and different perspectives. And last year, Mark also directed and co-produced a kind of companion piece. In fact, I'll move that so it doesn't take up camera space, but called Women Make Film, and it's all about, as you'd imagine, the experience of women filmmakers, and how they've been overlooked for you know, pretty much the whole story of film, including, he admits, in his own documentary. So yeah, but Mark's a lovely guy. I've met him many times at the Glasgow Film Theatre, and even when you're just walking out, he'll say, like, in that accent, it was a Northern Irish accent, you know. Didn't you find that I can do his voice? He's got a very, it's got a lilt to his voice, and he narrates it in a very sedated manner. It's quite wonderful, but he'll talk to you as if you're his old buddy, and he's just so excited no matter what film you've just seen. Mark's the kind of film critic I like, where a film doesn't need to be perfect, but he can find something in it that was perfect and still love it just for that, for a shot, for a frame. Yeah. And I like that. He was the second host of Moviedrome after Alex Cox, and took a lot of flack. But I love Mark Cousins, and he's a lovely man. And he makes great documentaries about the history of film. The next one's out next month, called A New Generation. Is covering the 10 years from that till now. Can't wait. Out next month. The 4K of Dune, David Lynch's Dune. No need to go into what this is about. You all know the story of Dune now that the remake's out, even if you didn't know this version. I wouldn't recommend jumping in now to this, but if you only have seen the Denis Villeneuve version, because you'll find out what happens, and in not the best way. I love David Lynch, and there's some Lynchian stuff in here that I absolutely adore, but if you want the Villeneuve experience, just stay with that and then come back and revisit this. Although this is the best way you'll ever see David Lynch's Dune. It's not for everyone, and again, I wouldn't want you to be put off the Villeneuve version, because this is messy, scuzzy, strange and odd. It's David Lynch, what do you expect? But even the source material is. Dune, the kind of first Villeneuve one you find, wasn't as strange as where it goes next with Muad'Dib. I'll say no more. Bringing Up Baby, one of the great screwball comedies of all time, with Cary Grant and Katie Hepburn and Baby, the leopard. Just, you know, there's not directed by the great Howard Hawks. Nothing can be said about this that's not already been written about a million times. Just one of the funniest movies ever made. Peter Bogdanovich, who just passed away, pretty much remade it as What's Up Doc. Same dynamic. Ryan O'Neal basically playing the Cary Grant part, with Barbara Streisand playing the Katie Hepburn part. There's all sorts of documentaries on all the participants on here, with audio interviews with Cary Grant even after he'd retired from movies. So Criterion, one of their releases of the year for me. Major D, Arrow Video. They have released the theatrical and the extended cuts with a plethora of extras. This used to be considered minor Sam Peckinpah, but to me there's no such thing. This is his kind of quasi sequel to Ride the High Country. It's kind of set in that world, but it's more about the army side of things. A Union cavalry officer and freeing ex-slaves and POWs, and his kind of tortured relationship with Richard Harris's character. I think he's a captain, and things become very difficult. But it's also got war notes in it. Again, a favourite of mine and of Sam Peckinpah. Probably not where you want to start with Sam Peckinpah, but certainly a great addition. And the limited stuff is actually a lot more than the standard version, so buy the limited edition if you are interested. Johnny Guitar, classic of queer cinema, classic of the Western genre in general. Ignore Johnny Guitar. This is the story of Vienna versus Mercedes Cambridge's character Emma Small. They want to run Joan Crawford out of town for just not being one of the subtext that she's a lesbian, for not being one of them, and they want her bar her soul in. Johnny Guitar is her friend, but it's two strong females in a western facing off against each other, which you just did not see in this era. You might get Barbara Stanwyck being a strong female, but you would have a man opposite her. But this, Johnny Guitar, one of the great westerns of all time, packed with extras, just what you want, with Martin Scorsese on the documentary. And then, won't go on length about these. Doctor Who continues to amaze with both the season sets and the animations that have continued aplenty and will do. I've done a video about that. I'll be doing videos about the ongoing animation range, so I won't go into them just now. But Doctor Who, the future is bright, and we know that because we can time travel and see it. It's my video, so it doesn't need to be movies. I can just make the rules up. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. This is them at their rock and roll peak, 1979, the No Nukes concert, where they just did a pure rock and roll show. It was their only show in 79, so they try out some tracks from The River that hadn't been released yet when it was still a single disc album, and Jackson Browne and Tom Petty come out and have a blast with them, and they cover Stay Just a Little Bit Long, and that goes straight into Jenny, 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 come and take a ride with me, Jenny, Jenny, woo, Jenny, Jenny. It's fantastic. It's just a great rock and roll show. Darkness on the Edge of Town, The River, Born to Run. If you like that trinity, this is the live album that you want in the middle of that. John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band. This comes with 2 Blurays, which contain everything on this. So you don't really need the CDs, but they're there anyway, and it's got a 130-page book. It contains both Plastic Ono Band albums, the one that John made, the one that Yoko made, and it's got fantastic stuff like the Elements mixes, where you can listen to the demos, and then it gradually adds in Klaus Furman's bass, or Ringo Starr's drums, or John's guitar, and it builds up to make the full track, and you hear it kind of coming to fruition. It's wonderful. Wonderful. If you like the Plastic Ono Band, which is my favourite Beatles solo album, that's what you want. The Harrison album that came out this year, the reissue of All Things Must Pass, no, forget about it. They only did the album on HD Blu-ray, which went all the outtakes as well. Come on, George, I know you're dead, but Prince, welcome to America. This is a great Blu-ray concert as an extra. It's got vinyl, CD of the missing album from 2010, but then a whole live concert from the Forum in LA, where he does just a greatest hits set, and then he covers all the stuff that he wrote for the time, Play That Funky Music, White Boy, and More Than This by Roxy Music. And then finally, let's just throw in the Daimajin trilogy, which is Japanese folklore, kind of the Japanese version of the Golem myth, you know, about the protector, the stone protector that comes to life for the villagers' sake and protects them when trouble's in town. So those were my picks. Didn't go into too much depth because there was so much to show, and then I've got all the horror ones to show as well. You can see why I cut this into 2. So listen, thanks very much for watching. Stay safe out there. Love and mercy. And if you have any favourites from this year that I haven't mentioned, pop them in the comments below. Take care.